one generation controls more than half of all the wealth in America. Baby boomers. They're sitting on over $85 trillion. Meanwhile, the two largest generations, millennials and Gen Z, hold just over 10% combined. For younger Americans, the dream their parents sold them is fading. It's being replaced by a nightmare of soaring rent, crushing debt, and paychecks that don't stretch far enough. This isn't just a generation gap, it's an invisible war over money. And in this war, brands are being forced to choose a side. For many, it's becoming a death match for their very survival. This is the story of how we got here, who's winning, and why the way you spend your money has become a declaration of war. The battle lines are drawn in the numbers. According to the Federal Reserve, boomers, born between 1946 and 1964, control a colossal $85.4 trillion. Generation X holds a respectable $43.7 trillion. But after that, the numbers fall off a cliff. Millennials and Gen Z together have just $17.97 trillion. Think about that for a second. The generations that are supposed to be in their prime earning years, the people who should be driving the economy, hold a fraction of their parents' and grandparents' wealth. Here's where the story gets worse. Back in 1990, Americans under 40 owned about 11.8% of the nation's wealth. Today, that share has been cut in half. At the same time, households over 60 now hold about 65% of all wealth in the US. This isn't just economics on a spreadsheet. It's a reality that shapes every single choice, every purchase, every career move, every hope for the future. For Gen Z, this reality is particularly brutal. They entered a world of gig work, historic student debt, and a housing market that feels broken. It's no surprise that more than half of Gen Z say they are worried about not having enough money. Their number one concern is the cost of living, a constant nagging anxiety. They're a generation defined by financial stress, where buy now, pay later isn't just a feature, but a tool for survival. And this is where the brand deathmatch begins. For decades, the marketing playbook was simple: appeal to everyone, build a legacy, cash in. That world is gone. Today, a brand's survival depends on navigating a consumer landscape that has been fractured by this economic divide. If you cater to the boomers and their trillions, you risk becoming a relic. But if you pivot to Gen Z with their demand for authenticity and digital-first lives, you might alienate the very customers who built your business. This conflict is creating a brutal sorting system. For every legacy brand struggling to adapt, a disruptive new company is capturing the wallets of a new generation. This isn't just out with the old, in with the new. It's a high-stakes war for economic dominance. And to understand how this war is being fought, first, we have to understand how it started. To understand why this chasm exists, you have to rewind the clock. This isn't about blame, it's about context. The economic world that shaped the baby boomers is almost unrecognizable today. Imagine coming of age in the post-war boom. America was a manufacturing powerhouse. Union jobs were stable, with pensions and benefits that could support a family on one income. A college degree was an affordable ticket to the middle class. In the 1980s, you could pay for a year of public university with a summer job. The path to a stable life was clear. At the center of it all was owning a home. For baby boomers, this was a realistic goal. The median home price was dramatically lower relative to income. But between 1990 and 2024, home prices shot up by over 400%, while household income grew by less than 200%. Baby boomers bought in early. By simply holding on, they watched their wealth explode. Real estate became the most effective wealth-building machine in modern history. But then, the rules of the game started to change. For Gen X and early millennials, the path got steeper. Manufacturing declined, unions weakened. Stable, lifelong careers began to feel like a fantasy. The economy shifted. Wealth came less from what you earned and more from what you owned. Those who already had assets, stocks, real estate, saw their wealth multiply. Everyone else was left behind. Millennials came of age during two of the worst economic crises in a century, the '08 crash and the 2020 pandemic. They walked into a scarred job market, weighed down with historic levels of student debt. That debt became an anchor for an entire generation. And then came Gen Z. They inherited the endpoint of all these trends. Their reality is a world where outstanding student loan debt totals a breathtaking $1.8 trillion. A world where a stable, well-paying job feels like winning the lottery, where doom spending, buying things to cope with a bleak economic future, is a real phenomenon. They're told they're lazy, that they spent too much on avocado toast, all while watching the wealth of their parents' generation reach astronomical heights, wealth driven by assets bought for a fraction of today's price. This isn't a story of one generation stealing from another, it's a story of a system built for one economic reality that has completely failed to adapt to a new one. The rules changed, but the scoreboard didn't reset. The result is a deep structural inequality that now falls along generational lines, and it's this gap that has turned the American marketplace into a battlefield. This economic divide has split the consumer market in two. It's forced brands into an impossible balancing act. The strategies that win over a 65-year-old boomer are often the very same ones that alienate a 25-year-old Gen Z. This is the brand deathmatch, and choosing your audience can mean life or death. First, let's look at the legacy brand. Think of the classic department store. For decades, it was an American institution, a trusted place where boomers shopped for everything. The business was built on a feeling of quality, heritage, and convenience that appealed to a loyal customer. Billions were spent on TV and print ads to build that trust. But for Gen Z, that model is broken. Why drive to a mall when you shop online? Why trust a faceless corporation when studies show only about half of Gen Z consumers trust major brands to begin with? For a generation where nearly 74% say they only buy from brands they believe in, the old promise of quality rings hollow. They see mass-produced goods, zero personal connection, an ancient business model. As a result, these retail giants have watched their market share crumble, losing ground to a new kind of competitor. Now look at the disruptor, the direct-to-consumer or DTC brand. Think of companies like Chamberlain Coffee or the apparel brand Gymshark. These brands were born on the internet. Their storefront is Instagram and TikTok. Their marketing budget isn't spent on primetime TV. It's invested in micro-influencers and content that feels real. Their success is a masterclass in the Gen Z playbook. First, they speak the fast-paced visual language of social media. They meet Gen Z where they are. Second, they understand that for Gen Z, a purchase is a statement of identity. These brands don't just sell a product, they sell a value system. They're transparent about their mission. This is crucial for a generation that researches obsessively and values authenticity above all else. And finally, they've weaponized data. Studies show most Gen Z shoppers prefer buying directly from a brand's website because it feels more personal. DTC brands use this direct relationship to tailor offers, making the customer feel seen in a way a giant department store never could. And finally, they understand the economic reality. They offer flexible payments because they know their customers on a budget. They create dupes, affordable alternatives to high-end products, a strategy that has turned brands like e.l.f. Beauty into billion-dollar companies. What we're seeing is a fundamental shift. Legacy brands operated on a broadcast model, a one-to-many message of stability. Disruptors operate on a network model, a many-to-many conversation built on community. The deathmatch isn't just product versus product, it's worldview versus worldview. And right now, Gen Z's worldview is winning. So, is this really a war with boomer villains and Gen Z victims? It's tempting to see it that way. The frustration is real, and the data is clear. One generation rode a wave of economic tailwinds the other can only dream of. But stopping there misses the bigger picture. This isn't just a generational squabble. It's a crisis of the American economic system itself. The generational war is a symptom, not the disease. The real culprit is a decades-long shift that has funneled wealth to the top and made it exponentially harder for anyone without assets to get ahead. The game is rigged. We have a system where wage growth has stagnated for decades, while the costs of housing, education, and healthcare have spiraled out of control. A system where tax policies consistently favor gains from investments over income from labor, creating a feedback loop where the rich get richer just by owning things. The baby boomers were in the right place at the right time. Gen Z arrived just in time to pay the price. The system itself is the true antagonist. The anger and anxiety young people feel is a rational response to an economy that feels hostile to their future, and how they spend their money is a direct reflection of this. When Gen Z rejects a legacy brand, it's not just about taste, it's a rejection of a corporate structure they see as opaque and extractive. When they embrace a DTC brand that champions transparency, it's an attempt to use their limited economic power to vote for a different kind of economy. This clash is forcing permanent change. The one-size-fits-all brand is an endangered species. The future belongs to brands that understand this new, fractured landscape. Success is no longer about the biggest marketing budget. It will be about connection, agility, and a deep understanding of the values and anxieties of a specific group of people. Brands will have to become more like politicians, building coalitions of support based on a shared identity. What about the great wealth transfer, where boomers are expected to pass down trillions? It might change things for some, but it won't fix the underlying problem. That wealth is incredibly concentrated and will likely make inequality within younger generations even worse, not solve it. What we are living through is more than a fight over money. It's a battle for the future of the American economy, a conflict between a system that rewards the past and a generation that is desperately trying to build a future. The brands that understand this will survive. The ones that don't will become casualties of war. This generational divide is reshaping our world, and we're seeing its effects everywhere. What are some of the brands you've seen win or lose this generational war? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. Make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the forces secretly shaping your life and your wallet.